The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Coming up, when we arrive home after a tough day at work, the last thing we want is an accident in our own building, but it happens all the time. We look to protect your rights as a tenant and make sure you know who is responsible. Also, do you have a family member with special needs? If so, you want to stay right here because we explore the rights of those who need us most. So don't go away because today's verdict starts right now. Welcome to today's verdict, the show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney for the next 30 minutes, David Lesch. Premises liability law is the body of law that holds the person who is in possession of land responsible for certain injuries suffered by persons who are present on the premises. Although some cases, such as so-called slip and fall cases, can seem simple, there are many nuances that you, as a viewer, should be aware of. The best way to keep you informed is to bring on an expert in the field, someone who will let you know what happens from the moment you fall to the point a jury is asked to deliberate. Joining us in studio as our expert is Mitchell Frankel. Mr. Frankel is a founding partner of Sussman & Frankel LLP, and we welcome him back to the show. Nice to have you back.
Nice to be back.
All right,
Thank
let's
you.
talk a little bit about premises liability. So many different types of accidents that happen in a building. Let's go through a couple. They can't all be slip and fall. Tell me about some cases that happens in buildings.
In addition to, like you mentioned, slip and fall on steps, trip and fall on steps, you have problems with, could have a problem with an elevator. It could mislevel, it could stop between floors, it could potentially drop. There's a whole host of things.
Now, these accidents that occur in a building, many times they can actually occur in the apartment itself. Not always, let's say, in the common area, but actually in your apartment. If an accident does happen in an apartment, do you still have recourse?
You do. There's obviously a difference. If the incident occurs inside an apartment, the person who is responsible will be the tenant of that apartment or the owner of that particular apartment. That could be a friend, a relative.
Let's say you're in that person's apartment, a friend of yours, and they're not careful with the flooring, and you end up taking a spill. You mean that person can be held responsible?
Depending on the circumstances, that person certainly could be held responsible, and you would be in your rights to bring a lawsuit against them if you were injured as a result of their negligence. However, oftentimes, not everyone who owns an apartment or rents an apartment has homeowners or other kinds of insurance to cover. So you would not necessarily have an insurance company behind a potential lawsuit, meaning you'd be suing someone who has no insurance coverage. So that is not your A1 scenario.
Right, you probably lose a friend too. Okay, now let's get into the outside of the apartment, into the building itself.
Right.
Stairways, slip and falls, that type of stuff. What are the general type of defects or the things that end up causing people to have accidents throughout a building?
Well, like you just said, with regard to the common areas, the difference with a common area as opposed to an individual apartment would be the homeowner association, if it's a co-op, the co-op association, if it's a condo, the condo association, if it's a rental, then obviously the owner of the building and perhaps the managing agent would be responsible for keeping the common areas such as a hallway, an elevator, safe, a stairway, safe for the residents of the apartment.
You have a superintendent that generally maintains the buildings. Certainly, throughout the city of New York, your superintendent is the person who's supposed to be keeping the areas clean. Right? Am I correct?
Right. Well, the super is supposed to do more than just keep the areas clean. They're supposed to do various repairs and maintenance work. If let's say there's a problem with the ceiling. Some people have problems with their ceilings where their ceilings actually collapse. There may be a water problem above the ceiling in the pipes or coming from the apartment above. repairs are supposed to be made. Now, you inform the super either can make minor repairs themselves, or then they can contact their boss, which would be the managing agent, and then contract it out to someone to fix that problem.
Which leads, by the way, to the issue of notice, because many people think that just because they have an accident in a building, the mere fact that they had the accident makes them able to recover from somebody. But that's not always the case, is it? I mean, there's something called notice.
Correct.
What do we mean by that?
Well, when you sue a premises owner or occupier for a problem, they have to have either created or caused or created the condition, meaning their employee or themselves created or caused the condition, or something called, as you pointed out, notice. With the notice, it has to either be actual or constructive, and that means simply they physically and actually knew about the condition before from a letter, from verbally, or the condition has existed long enough where someone with reasonable inspection should have been able to know about it.
Well, let's go outside the building now. Now we're on the sidewalks.
Sure.
Who's responsible for that area?
Well, it depends on the building. If it is a commercial space or it's a large residential building, it's the owner of that building is responsible for maintaining and keeping a safe sidewalk. Now, if it's a small 1, 2, or 3 family home, that would be the responsibility of the City of New York. And when you sue the City of New York, then you have a whole host of other issues.
That's very important for the viewers to understand. Why is it different if the City of New York is considered to be a defendant in a lawsuit?
Sure. Well, if the city is involved, there are other hoops you have to jump through, and those hoops involve what's called a notice of claim. That notice of claim is simply a document where you indicate what your claim is, what happened to you, when it happened, and give specifics, and you file that within 90 days of the incident. If you don't file it within 90 days of the incident, you very well could be precluded from ever bringing that claim. Then, once you do that, then you have to appear for what's called a 50H hearing, and that's giving testimony under oath as to what happened to you and what the result was.
Listen, I don't have too much more time with you, unfortunately, but you got to give us some tips here. You're somebody that's in the building. You think you have an accident. Tell me what you do once you get a client who has a potential injury in a building. Give us some tips. What do you do?
Sure. Well, someone comes in to me with an incident. I first ask for photos if they have it.
Okay.
So hopefully, if something happens to you, you take pictures of the incident as soon as possible, because that condition can disappear. It can be fixed, and if it's fixed, then there will be no evidence of what caused you to fall. So obviously, you need pictures. You need to round up some witnesses. Don't think they're necessarily going to be around later, because they tend to disappear as well. Get names, contact information of any witnesses of the incident. Also, for this issue of notice, try to get names of people who knew about the condition before it happened to you, and also get their contact information.
Okay, speaking of contact information, let's get yours really quick.
Sure. Phone number 212-688-8895 or email mdf@sussman-frankel.com, and it's on the screen.
We have it on the screen. All right, well, you're going to come back again, aren't you?
I most certainly will.
All right, well,
great.
Thanks very much. But we have to take a quick break. But when we return, we will take a look at the legal system and its impact on the rights of children with special needs. We'll be right back.
Sir, are you okay?
Everything's fine. Thanks.
You wouldn't ignore this, so why ignore the signs of a stroke? Call 911 immediately, because time lost is brain lost.
I don't mind at all.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of finding someone to invest in his vision? 1 in 4.5 million. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more.
Welcome back. I'm your host, David Lesch. Our show is dedicated to you, our viewers, and we're here to answer your legal questions. So if there is a topic or question you'd like us to cover, let us know on Facebook at www.facebook.com/today'sverdict or tweet us at Today's Verdict. The United States Center for Disease Control has now identified 1 in 88 American children on the autism spectrum. This is a 10-fold increase in 40 years. Studies have shown that the disorder affects over 2 million people in the United States and tens of millions worldwide. And because April is Autism Awareness Month, on today's show we will look at how to protect the legal rights of those living with autism. Joining us today is nationally recognized special needs attorney and founding partner of Littman and Crooks LLP, Bernard Crooks. Mr. Crooks is also the chair of the firm's Elder Law and Special Needs Department, and we are very happy to have him here.
I'm happy to be here.
You know, it could be devastating for a family member to find out, to get that diagnosis that your child does have autism, and I think once they find out that this is the situation, I think they are very much overwhelmed. What's the process that you go through as a new parent when you find out from that general practitioner that we think your child has autism?
Well, first of all, David, there's no parent manual for this. It's hard enough to be a parent. And then you add to that, you have a parent with, you're a parent of a child with a disability. The first stage is denial. They don't diagnose the child as being autistic when he or she is born. Sometimes it can take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years before the parents notice that something's wrong. Usually starts off where the child's not walking at typical age. Maybe it's taking an extra 6 or 8 months or a year. And then once they get through the denial stage, they then have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do about it? And accept the fact that it is what it is. And that is a process in and of itself, too.
You know, I've read it's like almost a mosaic of symptoms. You never really know exactly when your child is considered to be autistic, because it's almost a process that flows. But the sooner a parent finds out and understands that this is what is, the earlier that they should be getting involved. What do they do when this happens? If you find out and now you realize, okay, this is what we have to deal with, what do you do?
Well, you're obviously dealing with a whole host of medical issues. Okay. I mean, the first step is, can we cure it? And then you find out the answer is no. Okay, then what can we do about it? And then you learn that there's a whole world out there of physical therapists, occupational therapists, behavioral therapists, all kinds of people who have hearts of gold, who are willing to help. You just have to get access to them. And fortunately, for parents of kids with autism, the parent-to-parent network is unbelievable. It's so incestuous. So if you join other groups, you'll meet parents who will turn you on to good therapists and good doctors, neurologists, and the people you really need to talk to. So once you deal with the medical issues, then you got to realize, well, hey, this kid needs to go to school.
Right. Well, now the child has certain rights, just as much as, if not more, than a child who doesn't have autism. What types of rights do they have with respect to schooling and whatever early intervention programs there are? Okay.
Well, first of all, every child in the United States is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. And the acronym for that is FAPE. So if you hear somebody call it FAPE, it's a free and appropriate public education. And that also includes children with disabilities. In fact, children with disabilities are not only entitled to educational services, but they're also entitled to something called related services, which are these therapies that I mentioned earlier. So in addition to the schooling, they may need occupational, physical therapy, and behavioral therapy, and all of those are included, or should be included, in the child's IEP, which is an individual educational program that is developed by a committee on special education.
Now you know all this, but how does a parent find any of this stuff out?
The school district is supposed to
tell them.
Yes, okay. Unfortunately, especially in New York City, that doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't happen timely. We've seen cases where months and years have gone by where parents were not informed of their rights. Kids were told that they can't come to school because they had behavioral problems or the teachers couldn't handle them. And when they came to our office, we had one case recently where a kid was sitting at home for 18 months without going to school because the parent thought that there was no school for him or for the child.
Okay, so now the parent finds out there's a place for my child. What do they do? Who do they apply? Where do they apply? Where do they go?
Well, they first have to meet with the Committee on Special Education. As a parent, they're entitled to be part of that team, part of that committee. The committee meets and determines where the appropriate placement should be for that child.
And let's give like a visual of the committee. One person, 2 people, 10 people. Who's in this room?
It depends. It could be from 8 to 10 people. There's usually a parent advocate there from the school. There's a couple people from the school district. If it gets adversarial, there may be lawyers from the school district and lawyers for the parents. But generally, it shouldn't start off like that.
Why would it be adversarial? Because it costs a lot of money to give the resources for the child?
That's sort of the unspoken truth here.
Okay.
It's
it is a lot of money.
It is expensive to educate a child, and it's very expensive to educate a child with disabilities.
Twice as expensive, 3 times expensive?
Maybe 3 to 4 times,
Okay.
yeah, depending upon the extent of the disabilities. So you can be on the autistic spectrum, you could be high functioning, you could be a child with Asperger's, or you could be very low functioning and need a high level of services. So it's expensive, and in this day and age of budget cuts, it's getting harder and harder for the district to make ends meet. So unfortunately, or fortunately for the parents who have knowledge, they're the ones who are going to get the services, but that's unfortunate for the ones who are not in the know.
Well, the committee then makes their decision. Is it 6 months? Is it right in front of the child or in front of the parent?
They usually meet. Now is what's called a CSE season, Committee on Special Education season. They meet in the spring and they determine what services the child and what type of schooling the child is going to need for the upcoming school year.
And what if you don't agree with it?
If you don't agree with it, you can appeal it. And many parents don't realize that they can appeal the decision of the Committee on Special Education.
Is there a time limit?
Well, no, they can do it at any time because a parent can request a CSE meeting anytime they want. So many people don't realize that if they are unhappy with the way things are going, and let's say it's October or November during the school year, they can request another CSE meeting and get changes to their child's services.
We have a lot more to get to, so Mr. Crooks, do not go anywhere, okay? But we have to take a quick break. Coming up, we will continue our discussion on autism and the law. Be right back.
Sir, are you okay? Everything's fine. Thanks.
You wouldn't ignore this, so why ignore the signs of a stroke? Call 911 immediately, because time lost is brain lost.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 110 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 600% increase in the last 20 years. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Welcome back. I'm your host, David Lesch. Remember that our show is here to serve you, our viewers. So don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/today'sverdict or on Twitter at Today's Verdict, and tell us what topics or questions you'd like us to cover on the show. On today's show, we've been discussing the legal protections for those living with special needs, specifically those living with autism. And with us today to share his legal expertise in the area is special needs attorney Bernard Crooks. Again, Mr. Crooks, thanks for being here. All right, the child is getting older, needs more resources, and certainly financially has to be taken care of. What types of things do you do for a child with respect to money, protecting their money?
Well, I think the first thing you need to look at is what is the child going to do after he gets out of school? The IEP and the special ed services go up until age 21. So believe it or not, David, that's the easy part.
Okay.
But then what happens when the kid's 21? There's a whole nother field called transition planning. Is the child going to be able to work? Is the child going to be able to go to the grocery store and make change? It's an adult now, it's not a child.
Now, up to a certain point, mommy takes care. Mommy is the guardian or daddy is the guardian. That's very easy.
Right.
But you do at some point need legal papers to have somebody appointed a guardian for this particular person. Am I correct?
Yes, under the law of New York State, every person who attains the age of 18 is presumed to have capacity unless they're determined to not have capacity.
Fine.
So that child who has autism on his 18th birthday technically can sign a contract, can go to a doctor, make major medical decisions for him or herself, unless the parent goes to court to become the child's legal guardian. If the parent doesn't do that, believe it or not, the doctor is not permitted to discuss the child's medical medical condition with the parent. So they need to go to guardianship, court to become their legal guardian so they can make financial decisions and medical decisions.
And that's a process itself. Because
yeah,
I know you from that process, by the way.
We've met in that process. It's not only for children, it can also be for adults who can't make decisions. But I think one of the things that gets lost in the shuffle here is just because a kid has autism or an adult has autism or any disability doesn't mean they can't make a decision for themselves.
Sure.
They may be limited functionally, but I know people who wear glasses. I know people who can't add without a calculator, people who can't change the oil in their car. Those are disabilities too. It's just we need to understand that these are people.
There's also a spectrum on that autism scale. Am I correct? There's some high functioning and not functioning.
So just because a person has autism doesn't mean that you need a legal guardian. So you really have to assess their functional limitations, determine whether or not they need a guardianship, and if they don't, then perhaps they can sign a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy to have somebody else make those decisions.
So it's really a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back into the resources for that child who is now an adult. What's going on there?
Well, they're an adult. Many of these adults need government benefits to help pay for their health care because the health care doesn't end just because they turned 18 or 21. So to take care of a child with severe medical needs, whether they're emotional or physical, can run into the millions of dollars. And fortunately, there are government programs that can help defray some of those costs, but there are very strict income and asset requirements that you have to meet in order to qualify. And for many kids, even if they have a little bit of money, they're going to be disqualified. So it's very important for the parents to go to a lawyer who understands how to navigate that system.
Why are they disqualified? Because they have certain assets in their own name? I don't understand.
Yeah, believe it or not, in order to get SSI, which is a critical component of special needs planning, because in many cases, SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income, that'll pay for the child's housing or residential placement. And in order to get SSI, you can't have more than $2,000 in your name. So many parents, when the kids are born, they'll stick money into a minor's account or some trust fund, and they're not realizing that later on they may be disqualifying the child.
So what do you do?
Well, the proper thing to do is, fortunately, about 20 years ago, a federal law was created called Special Needs Trusts, and New York adopted it a year later, so it's widely accepted in New York State. If the money is placed into a special needs trust, and it's got to be properly drafted, then the money in that type of a trust doesn't count as belonging to the kid, so it won't disqualify him or her from receiving these government benefits.
Well, let's say that there's a certain amount of money in the trust. At some point, does the state or the city recoup that money, or does that just go to the parents or something like that?
It depends, David. There's a lot of different ways for a kid with autism or other disability to get money. That child could get money because maybe they were malpracticed at birth, so there was a lawsuit against a doctor or hospital.
But that wouldn't necessarily be an autism case.
It wouldn't necessarily, but it could be.
Could be?
It could be, maybe on a cesarean section. Okay. So anything could happen. There could be any type of malpractice, or there could be any accident. Okay. So if it's the child's money and it goes into one of these special needs trusts, then yes, on the death of the child, but not before, the government gets repaid out of any monies left in the trust. However, let me just clarify that many people assume, and they don't do special needs trusts because they assume that all monies in all special needs trusts have to go back to the government when the kid with autism dies. That is not true. So if it's the parents' money or the grandparents' money or the aunt or the uncle,
it goes back.
It doesn't go back. It goes back to the family.
Back to the family.
Yeah,
okay.
Not the government. So if mom and dad have a kid with autism and they're worried about what's going to happen to the kid when they pass away, and they set up their own special needs trust for that kid, when the kid dies, the money can go to the brothers and sisters and grandchildren.
Well, I'm sure some of the viewers are wondering who's going to manage this money. There's a lot of money in these supplemental needs trusts.
It's a big issue. Lots of times, the knee-jerk reaction, David, is to appoint a family member. But, you know, that is fraught with complications. Maybe the family member is not so financially sophisticated. Maybe they're married to a person who doesn't understand what it's like to live with a person with disabilities, who's not sensitive to it. So in many cases, the best option is to appoint a professional trust company or bank. But again, then you're getting involved in fees. But we've found in many cases it's worth it.
And by the way, with respect to these decisions where somebody is appointed a guardian to either manage money or to manage the person's own medical decisions, it could be two different people.
Yes, it could be, and a lot of times it makes sense for it to be two different people.
So the mom or the dad can help make the medical decisions, the day-to-day, and somebody with a professional background in either finance or somewhere else can make those decisions.
And a lot of times that's a wise thing to do because in many cases we've seen the parent or other family member who's trustee, they view the money in the trust as one for all and all for one. And it's really supposed to be just for the benefit of the kid with autism or other disabilities.
Well, so what do you mean that? You mean that they're taking the money from the child?
Yeah, we need a new car, so let's go out and buy a Mercedes.
For everybody.
Yeah, or let's go take a vacation.
But it's not everybody's money.
It's not.
It's not everybody's money. Okay, I don't have you for too much longer. Let's talk about some tips. What tips would you give a parent finds out that a child may be suffering with autism? Tell her or him what to do.
The first thing is you are your child's best advocate. The mother and the father always know best, so go with your gut feeling. Don't be afraid to take on the system. The system is fraught with bureaucracies. They're incentivized to defer you and defer you and defer you to help you go away. So keep fighting would be the first thing. The second thing is at some point you have to accept that this is a reality and stop wondering, why did this happen to me?
Did I eat something that was wrong? Was it a vaccination? Right. Whatever the reason is.
It is what it is.
Okay.
So you got to start, instead of looking in the rearview mirror, looking through the front windshield and say, okay, we're going to make the best of this, and what are we going to do about it? Because people with autism are people first, and they can have a very good quality of life. It just takes a proper focus and dedicated parents to make sure that they're advocating for the child.
Okay, let's get a hold of you. How do we find you? You're a parent. You need some help. You got to take on the Board of Education. Where do they get you?
Well, you can go to our website at specialneedsnewyork.com. Has a lot of informative tips and frequently asked questions. Or they can contact us at 212-490-2020 or 914-684-2100.
I see it. We have it up on the screen.
Terrific.
And hopefully you're going to come back and we can go, because unfortunately or fortunately, this is an issue that is not going away.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing attention to it.
All right. Well, thanks for being here.
You got it.
Well, that's all for tonight. It's now time to deliberate. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us and, of course, you for watching. Remember, if there's a legal topic or issue you would like to see on the show, email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. And until we see you again, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.
Be free. Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad. Nice.
Charles!
Nice, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
These things we count on every day started as ideas. Ideas from the minds of African Americans. Support minority education today so we don't miss out on the next big idea tomorrow.